Hello Adobe! This video is an open letter to the programmers of Adobe Premiere Pro. But my target audience is also anyone who seriously uses Premiere Pro for their video editing. This video is a long and detailed feature request, and part 2 is a bug report, and I need you, my fellow editors, to watch the whole thing. I know it's long, I'm sorry. And if you've experienced any of the bugs or want any of the features that I talk about, I want you to go to Adobe's official wish form and tell them about it. Don't worry, there's a Google Doc with all the information you'll need. I've made the whole thing very easy for you. My name is Taryn Van Hemert, and I'm a full-time video editor with countless videos under my belt, most of them edited with Premiere Pro. It's a great program with great features, but let's not kid ourselves, it does have its problems. So every time I noticed a problem in Premiere, I wrote it down and recorded it. Now it's time to share. I tried to give every single item the proper context that it needs, and I have tried to be as concise as possible. Now every single item is carefully labeled and numbered in the video and video description and in that Google Doc, so there's no confusion. And if anything has been changed, I will update the description, the Google Doc, and add video annotations to reflect that. So be sure to turn annotations on for this video. Okay, without further ado, here we go. So the way that we apply transitions in Premiere could be greatly improved because currently there is only a single default transition that you can choose with a single default duration of that transition. And that's not nearly enough. If you go into the keyboard shortcuts menu, you find that we have wipe, dip to white, dissolve, and whatever the default transition is, and those are the only ones that can be applied with keyboard shortcuts. But it shouldn't just be 4 transitions in here, they should all be in here. Every single transition that exists should be able to have a keyboard shortcut assigned to it. But even that is not good enough because if you apply transitions that way, they will come with all the default settings and they will not be customizable. So, what I currently do is I have a whole other sequence that comes with all of my templates that I copy and paste transitions from. And in this way I have complete control over the direction, the duration, and all of the settings of those transitions. This actually works pretty well, but I shouldn't have to do it this way. What we really need is the ability to make presets out of transitions. So you would right-click on a transition, you would say create preset, and then you would have completely customized preset transitions you could reuse at any time, and most importantly, they would have keyboard shortcuts that could be used to apply them. And furthermore, every single preset that a user makes should be able to have a keyboard shortcut assigned to it. This would be incredibly useful from a productivity standpoint, because the only alternative is to click and drag from the effects panel, and then of course you might accidentally rename things, and that just takes forever when you're doing it hundreds of times per day. It may also be a good idea to just take everything in the effects panel and put it into the keyboard shortcuts menu so that anything in the effects panel can have a shortcut assigned to it. But definitely there should be keyboard shortcuts able to be assigned for presets and those new transition presets that I already mentioned. Okay, so I love the fact that Premiere has presets. The problem with it is you have to click from that little teeny tiny icon and drag it from there, because if you don't, you'll accidentally rename the preset. Look what happens. You try to press spacebar to play the video and your preset gets unnamed. So you're always deleting presets on accident because you're always unnaming them, because renaming them is incredibly easy, which is a bad thing. I want to be able to click and drag from the entire name of the preset in the exact same way that it works with everything else in the effects panel, because that's a lot larger of an area to click and drag from, which is a lot easier to do. So on the rare occasion when you do want to change the name of a preset, you should have to go into the right-click menu to do it. But left-clicking definitely should not rename a preset. This next one will be very easy to implement and will be very useful for editors. There should be a shortcut to delete transitions. It's easy to apply transitions with Ctrl-D or whatever shortcut you've assigned to it, but there is absolutely no easy way to delete transitions. If you want to delete a transition, you have to zoom way in and click on it and then press delete. And you have to do that for every single transition that you want to delete. This takes a long time, and if you accidentally select anything else, you'll end up deleting other things. So we just need the ability to select all the clips we want, press one keyboard shortcut, all the transitions disappear, and nothing else gets deleted. There should also be a shortcut for reversing a clip. Now, I actually already have something like this set up with auto hotkey because fortunately you're able to get to the speed/duration control by using a keyboard shortcut, and from there if you press tab space enter, it will actually reverse the clip. So I put that through auto hotkey and made a macro so that I can just hit that keyboard shortcut and it'll happen. But I shouldn't have to do that. Premiere should support this functionality natively, and you should be able to assign a keyboard shortcut to that very basic functionality. Here we have a rapid zoom in on Linus's face just for comedic effect, but let's say that I want to ease these keyframes. What I have to do is select all of them, right click, temporal interpolation, ease in. Right click, temporal interpolation, ease out. It'd be really nice to have keyboard shortcuts for those, but I don't see them anywhere in here. And while I'm on the subject, everything else in the keyframe right click menu that doesn't have a keyboard shortcut for it should have a keyboard shortcut for it. There should definitely be a keyboard shortcut for add remove keyframe, this little guy right here. This has been a feature of Flash since Flash began. You just press F6. And apparently we can do it in After Effects, but not Premiere. It'd be pretty easy to do as well. Here's one way it could work. You'd select the items you want, put the playhead where it belongs, and then push one keyboard shortcut to either create or delete or toggle create delete keyframes. Also, everything else in the effects controls. Things like go to previous keyframe, go to next keyframe. Those should have shortcuts. Also, reset parameter, definitely reset effect. And this little guy right here, it's called the transform icon, and it selects the current object in the program monitor. Very useful. It'd be great to have a keyboard shortcut for that, at least just for the motion effect. And also a shortcut for this little triangle unfurl button, at least just for the motion effect. It is possible to toggle target videos on and off, and I use that all the time, but you can't lock them with keyboard shortcuts, and you can't turn them invisible with keyboard shortcuts, and you can't use keyboard shortcuts to mute or solo an audio track. All of these things you should be able to do with keyboard shortcuts. So you can make as many workspaces as you like, but you can only get to 9 of them using keyboard shortcuts. I feel like all workspaces should have shortcuts, not just 9. This one's incredibly simple. We need a shortcut that just plays the video. It does not function like pause/play like spacebar. The problem with spacebar as a toggle is that you don't necessarily know that you're playing the video when you hit it. We need a keyboard shortcut that we can just mash repeatedly until the video starts playing, for any time Premiere's being laggy. Here's one that many of you editors watching are going to want: the ability to ripple delete whatever is located underneath the playhead. Now, I already have this ability because I strung together 2 other shortcuts using auto hotkey. That's select clip at playhead and then ripple delete. But Premiere should just have this ability. Also, notice how when I use ripple delete normally, it moves the playhead. The user should have complete control over what happens with the playhead. So there should be an option somewhere to have ripple delete not move the playhead. Alright, now here is a big one. A shortcut to get into the effects panel so that you can search from it immediately. As you may be able to tell, I already have this shortcut because I set it up with the macros on my G15 Logitech keyboard. The macro I programmed to make this work is absolutely insane. It is Control-Shift-Alt-1, Control-Shift-Alt-7, Tab 27 times exactly, Shift Backspace, and then you type in whatever you want. It has to be exactly that and cannot be anything else. I'll explain why in another video if there's a demand for it. So you're going to see it right here. I click the button, bam. One shortcut, I'm in the effects panel, I can search for anything I like. Also on top of that, I have macros to type stuff in immediately. But Premiere doesn't need to support that functionality. Premiere should just have this shortcut, something that gets you into the effects panel search bar. Incredibly useful, I can tell you that from first-hand experience. But mine doesn't work 100% of the time. And while we're at it, there might as well be a shortcut to get into the bin panel search bar, although with multiple bins this might be kind of tricky and it wouldn't be nearly as useful as the effects panel search bar shortcut button. But I'm sure some people would appreciate this functionality. Okay, so the reference monitor is obviously useful for color correction, and I use it for that a lot. The trouble with it is that if you have it on when you're not really using it, it kind of slows down Premiere. That's understandable. So once you're done using it, you want it to go away. I have a keyboard shortcut that makes this thing appear, but if I press it again, it just cycles through the timelines. You can't use the same shortcut to make it go away. You have to push the X. So you see I'm pressing the shortcut to make it appear, I press it again, and then you just cycle through the timelines. So I'd like a shortcut that makes that thing disappear, or better yet, just toggle on and off. And the same thing applies for the titler. I'm sure every Premiere editor is aware that having the titler open slows down playback of the video significantly. But there's no way to close the titler unless you click that tiny little X. Or you could just use Alt F4, but of course that's terrifying because you might accidentally close Premiere and lose all your work. So just a shortcut to close the titler would be really nice. When you're navigating through bins, you have to push that little button up there in order to go back. There is no ability to assign a keyboard shortcut to do that behavior. Now in Explorer, you can do this very easily, and I do it all the time with backspace. You wouldn't necessarily want the shortcut to be backspace, but you should be able to assign a shortcut to that behavior. On the subject of keyboard shortcuts, it's kind of difficult to create them. You can kind of click around in here and you might or might not get the ability to make one. There should be a little icon that had a little plus on it or something that you can just click on for much easier and more intuitive shortcut creation. When you're assigning a new keyboard shortcut to something, sometimes you get this warning that the shortcut you're trying to assign has already been used. And so it says, oh, it will no longer have a shortcut. So you click the X, because you're like, oh, I don't want to overwrite a shortcut. So you click the X, and then once you find a shortcut that'll work, then you go about your merry way. But even though you push the X on that, it turns out Premiere still actually overwrote those keyboard shortcuts. In my opinion, overwriting a keyboard shortcut like that should require the user's explicit consent. It shouldn't just happen accidentally. You should have to confirm that you want to overwrite the shortcut. The keyboard shortcuts menu is great, but it'd be even better if there was an optional graphical interface where you could easily see at a glance what keyboard shortcuts you have and haven't used. You can see here that I haven't used Y for anything, and so I can assign that to whatever I want. These are just mock-up images. I don't suggest that it works this way, but basically the idea is that you can assign things using this, and you can see what you've already assigned. Here you can see that you've got Control and Shift selected, so it shows you every single one that uses Control and Shift, so you know which ones to avoid. But this isn't a priority at all. I would rather have all the keyboard shortcuts that I've mentioned first before having this thing. It doesn't really add any functionality, it just makes things a bit more convenient. Okay, that's it for the keyboard shortcut feature requests. One final note though, none of these need to have keyboard shortcuts assigned to them. We just need the ability to assign our own keyboard shortcuts to these things. This one has enormous potential. We should have the ability to select any clips we want on the timeline and turn that into a preset. There should be an option in this little menu where you click it, it's like, make this into a preset, and it becomes a preset. This would function exactly the same way that a copy-paste functions. Notice, I just pasted that into this timeline. And it automatically imports all the clips that you need, it applies all the effects that you need, it links it the way that it's supposed to be, it has the colors the way that they're supposed to be, everything is just done for you. But instead of relying on copy-paste to do that, it would be doable through the presets panel. And, of course, you need to have keyboard shortcuts to do this. I cannot even describe how magnificently useful this feature would be. Okay, check this one out. Say that you've got two video clips that are right next to each other and you notice that one of them, you want to start it a little bit later. But if you use the slip tool, you cannot make it move because the edge of the clip is over here. So you have to move the edge of the clip and then you can move it with the slip tool. I say, well, why? Why should I have to do that? You should be able to hold Alt or Control while using the slip tool to allow it to move the edge of that clip while it's slipping, instead of just the default behavior all the time. I know that's the entire point of the slip tool, but it does get in the way sometimes, and it would be really nice to have that alternative behavior for it. Or just another tool that would work that way. When you export a video from Premiere, by default it will go into the last folder that you exported a video into. But really what it should be doing is putting that video into the last folder that you exported to from that particular project file. You see, because some of us work on multiple projects at a time, and those projects sometimes have to be exported multiple times for different revisions and different platforms, and this would make that so much smoother. Here's a very simple one that's always kind of gotten in the way. Scrolling through the timeline with the scroll wheel is far too slow. I wish that we had an option over here in the preferences menu to change the speed at which we are able to, this is taking a long time because I don't know, maybe that's a bug. if we could change the speed at which we scroll, but the only thing you can change is the direction and the type of scroll. You can't change how fast it goes. Here's a minor annoyance. When you select a clip, it turns pure white and you cannot see what color it is. So if you're trying to change colors of stuff, you have to unselect it before you see what color it's changed to. I'd like to just be able to see what color something is at the same time as it's selected. Minor thing though. When you get this message, there should be the option to render all offline footage just as blackness rather than having to use that weird graphic, because you don't necessarily want to have to deal with it. If you're trying to use warp stabilization on a video clip and you forget to hit analyze, or if the analyzing has not completed, then you get this funny banner that's rendered directly onto the exported footage. This one actually went up on our YouTube channel looking like this. That is my fault though, I knew it could happen. Anyway, what you have to do is click Do Not Display Warning Banner. But a newbie is not going to realize that that warning banner will actually be rendered onto the video by default. Now I like the banner, I want to see it, but I feel like the default behavior should have it not rendered onto the video. Oh, and one more thing, when you're using a preset to apply warp stabilization, which is what I do to get around this annoying thing, you still have to click Analyze to make it start. I would prefer that Analyze be auto-clicked just like it is when you apply the warp stabilizer without a preset. In that case, analyzing starts happening automatically. So in After Effects, when you're messing with keyframes and you hold Alt, you're able to expand them out relatively like this, which is wonderful and really useful. In Premiere, all it does is duplicate them, which isn't bad, but I would like the ability to expand those keyframes relatively somehow, just like you can in After Effects. When you are trying to choose a preset for exporting your video, you have to scroll through this massive list to get to the one that you actually want, which is usually YouTube in our case. And it just takes forever. You can't even use the scroll wheel. So anyway, I found a way around this, wouldn't you believe? You kind of like do this. Yeah, and then you get to the bottom really quickly. But we shouldn't have to do that. There should just be a way to go through that list quickly. When you're moving keyframes around in the Effect Controls panel and you move it all the way to the edge, look at that, the ease handle disappears. And yet you can still select the keyframe, so why is the ease handle gone? Is that a bug? I feel like those handles should still be there. When you click this little stopwatch and it says this action will delete existing keyframes, there's no option to tell it not to ask ever again, unlike in After Effects. Sometimes I have graphics that are much larger than the standard view, so I have to zoom out in order to see them. The trouble is that 10% is not always enough to be able to see the entire thing and to be able to scale it properly. So in this case, look, the thing is huge and I can't really see it if I go just to 10%. So it would be nice to be able to manually type in whatever amount I want to zoom out to. But please don't change the ability to use the scroll wheel to change the zoom level, because that is really quick and useful. If you resize the Effect Controls panel too large, all the color wheels scale to be way too large. Maybe this is a bug, but anyway, it should have a size limit. When you create a color matte and you choose a color for it and everything's handy dandy, you have to manually call it something, like black matte. But in After Effects, it does this for you automatically. So you guys already have that code, it'd be nice to have that feature in Premiere. When you're making a color matte, you have the option to choose a color, obviously, but there's no dropper tool. You can't choose a color from the screen. Now in this case I just grabbed the hex code from Photoshop, but anyway, you should be able to use an eyedropper tool when you're making a color matte. Here's something I've been wanting for a long time, which is spell check. If we had that in Premiere, I could stop Googling things or pasting stuff into Word to see if I'm an idiot and spell something wrong. The bounding box on the titler is pure white. It's not white and black, so if you're changing text against a white background, you can't see what you're doing. It should be white and black. And furthermore, title thumbnails have a black background, so if your text is in black, now you can't read it. You know how there's an option to toggle the background on the titler? There should also be one in the bin to toggle a background onto the titles that you have, so you can actually read them. Or somehow there should be a way to see stuff without a black background in the way. The titler is great, but if anything goes beyond the edges of it, it gets cropped off and there's nothing you can do about it. You see this? This is too bad. I really wanted to have this scrolling along, but it got cropped off. The only solution is to go in here and have it do the auto scroll, and then you can have it start off screen. But there's no way to get it to start off screen with just having it be a static image. Well, why not? I should be able to have a static image and have it go beyond the edges of the title or box. But again, I must stress, have the option to be able to do that, because sometimes you don't want that to happen. Now, every single time you open up the titler, you get this weird, see, look at all these title styles, they're just loading, and this takes a long time, and it kind of lags Premiere while it's happening. The obvious solution is to delete all of these, but that takes a long time as well. So, I don't know the solution, but these title styles can be troublesome. This is a pretty minor one. In the titler, when you have multiple lines of text, or you have multiple sizes in the same text box, it borrows new text settings from the left, which sometimes works, but it seems to not work a lot of the time. And at least it should borrow the text settings from the line that you're currently on. It shouldn't borrow them from the previous line where the sizes are going to be totally different potentially. Small thing though. Another small problem, when you do a right justify, it includes spaces in that right justification. And there's no way around this. You can delete it, but then it'll go to the next line. That's annoying. So the only thing you can do is to add another space where it doesn't belong, at the very end of the sentence. So one of my tricks to save time is to watch the video while I'm editing. However, there are certain actions you can take that stop playback for seemingly no reason, like dragging clips out of the source monitor and onto the timeline. I feel like there's no reason why that should stop video playback, but it does. Here's another example. Simply closing and opening the reference monitor is enough to stop video playback. I see no reason why this should be true. If an action doesn't have to stop video playback, it shouldn't. The time remapping feature is pretty cool. You can do some nice speed ramps, but unfortunately it seems to be limited at 1000% speed for some reason. When you use the rate stretch tool, there's no limit. Time remapping should not be limited either, if possible. The old shuttle jog control is now gone. You guys have this really cool button editor where I can customize exactly what I want to see on my program monitor, but the shuttle jog is gone. Some of us really liked that thing, myself included, so it'd be nice to have it back. Now this is actually a great example of why some features should just be optional. Most of the features I've been asking for are also optional because I know that some people like Premiere just the way it is. There's no need to force editors to use a feature or not to use a feature. By making features like the shuttle jog optional, everyone is happy. Oh, and I just found out there is a workaround for this one right now. You can use the scrubbable hot text located here. Here's just a general concern I have about Premiere's UI. Sometimes you encounter these teeny tiny little buttons. If there's room around a button that's not being used for anything else, I feel like the button should just be larger. I see no reason why not. Okay, here's a big one, and I'm sure you saw it coming. UI scaling. Premiere only has one size, and because everything is based upon pixels, if your monitor has really teeny tiny pixels, then everything becomes teeny tiny. And that's why I refuse to upgrade my big monitor to a 4K one. So a scalable UI is going to be more and more necessary as we get deeper into 4K, 6K, 8K? I don't know how many Ks, but we're gonna need that scalable UI. So I use a keyboard shortcut to disable clips on the timeline. Of course I do. I do this instead of deleting them because I might want to bring them back later. The trouble is, when you're double clicking on something and there's a disabled clip above it, it highlights the disabled clip. I feel like a disabled clip should be not interactable at all until you re-enable it. You guys did everything right with the label colors in Premiere. I love that you can change the names, you can choose a custom color, you can choose where they go, and you can apply them with keyboard shortcuts, which is wonderful. I just wish that we had more of them. Doubling the number ought to do it. When you're exporting your project, sometimes you get this message because there's unlinked media in your timeline. But if it's not within the in-out points that you've chosen, I don't see why this message should appear. After all, it doesn't apply to me. Here's one that I frankly don't fully understand. If you go into your clips in the bin and you go to the Modify Clip menu, you can choose a preset there, and I usually have both of my audio tracks on right, because that's just how we film. But if you try to do it within the timeline, you can't get to the presets. Is that intentional? We should be able to do that, right? Audio clip thumbnails don't look anything like the audio clip. They're just some random image. They should look the same. But of course, as I usually say, this should be an optional feature. Not everyone's going to want this. So the rolling edit tool is great. It's wonderful. I use it all the time. But for some reason, whenever there's a transition in the way, you are forbidden from using the tool. And there's not any alternative behavior that's been substituted here. You're just forbidden from using the tool at all. Unless you go right above the transition right here, and then you can move things around with the rolling edit tool. I'm pretty sure we used to be able to use the rolling edit tool on transitions. I see no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. Here's a weird one. Sometimes when you change the workspace, you lose, oh, where did it go? Where did my sequence go? Now, at first I thought this was a bug, but now I believe that what's actually happening is that Premiere considers opened and active sequences as a part of the workspace. I really don't think it should be done this way. After all, every single project is going to have very different sequences, making it impossible for a workspace layout to know which sequences should be open in the timeline window. Open sequences should be considered as a part of the saved project file, not as a part of the workspace. I hope that makes sense. And last, but probably not least, when you're trying to change the anchor point of a clip or graphic or something, you have to change the numbers manually or with the hot text. Instead of that, there should just be a button that you press. And after you press that button, you can click anywhere on the image and bam, the anchor point would change immediately. This would be wonderful. But there are two different ways that this could be implemented. Number one is, when you click to change the anchor point, it would not only change the anchor point coordinates, but it would also change the motion position coordinates at the same time. Which, that's the way that I would prefer. The other way is to have that click only change the anchor point coordinates, in which case the entire graphic would be necessarily moved off to the side. Ideally, we would have both of these options available to us. Alright, that's all the feature requests I have. Congratulations for making it this far. Now listen, there is a singular unifying principle behind almost all of the feature requests I've made here today, which is saving time. And that means every second counts. But 1 second is actually a lot of time. I should be saying every millisecond counts. When I first started out, I was editing NCIX Tech Tips videos, and it took me 5 hours to do a 10 to 15 minute video. But today, with better hardware and all the time-saving productivity tricks that I use, I can finish a video like that in less than an hour. And that's what I mean when I say that every millisecond counts. It really adds up. So, like I said at the start of the video, if you work with Premiere and you want any of these features that I've talked about here, I need your help. The right way to do this is to go through Adobe's official wish form, which I have linked to in the video description. Also in the video description, you will find a link to a Google Doc that lists all the feature requests. They're numbered, labeled, explained, and time-stamped. Now, the original plan was to get you guys to copy-paste from this Google Doc, delete the items you disagree with, modify the list to your heart's content, and then submit it as your own wish form. Unfortunately, I just learned that the wish form restricts you to 2,000 characters only, which is tiny. That's like 5 paragraphs. That's not even enough room for the titles of each of these feature requests. It's only enough room for the numbers. So here's what we're going to do instead. Open up the video description so that you can see all the requests, which are labeled and timestamped for you. Then open up a text editor like Word and copy-paste this intro text from the video description into it. Then go down my list and type in the number of each feature that you want, pressing enter between each one so that all your requests are in a nice neat row. As you go, you can add your own explanation and comments to each request. If you feel very strongly about a particular request, let them know about it. And if you have opinions that are contrary to my own about a particular request, please write that in too. So your wish forms will ultimately look something like this. Check to make sure it's less than 2,000 characters, then copy-paste that into the official Adobe wish form. Fill out your information accurately and then hit submit. To the Adobe employees watching this, listen, From the 2,000 character limit, I'm getting the impression that the wish form is for requesting one item at a time, even though it doesn't explicitly say that anywhere. But we've already been doing it that way. I've submitted many of these feature requests individually, and not a single one of them has made it through so far. Many of these are very simple, reasonable requests that myself and the rest of the community have been asking for years. I have seen threads from up to 10 years ago discussing some of the features that I've talked about in this video. But for whatever reason, these things are still not a part of Premiere. So I don't just have one feature request, I have 57 of them because they just keep stacking up. And this video is my last hope for getting any of these done. So my fellow editors, this is why I need your help. I can't do it alone. Also, to the Adobe employees watching, I'm sorry if this whole thing results in too huge a flood of feature requests. If that happens, get in contact with me. I've already sent you my email in my wish form, and I'll update the video description with whatever information you'd like me to pass on to the audience. And here's call to action number 2. Please share this video with other Premiere editors. Post it to forums and so on. The more traction this video gets, the better. And be sure to subscribe because I make videos like this very infrequently and you'll miss them otherwise. One more thing. For one reason or another, the Premiere developers will not necessarily implement all of these changes that I and others have been asking for. So if anyone watching knows anything about modding, maybe we can mod Premiere and make this stuff happen ourselves. So please, if you can, program a mod that does one or more of the things that I talked about in the video. The keyboard shortcut things are especially useful. Get in contact with me and I'll put that in the video description so that everyone can use it. Okay, I think I covered all the bases there. Now, hold on to your butts because part 2 is up right now, and that video has all the bugs that I know about, and there are some big ones. So, you can submit those feature requests now or click over to watch the bug report.